Hi, all. This is William Ramsey. William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, we have Dr. Hans Uter. You just heard him play the sitar. He has a show upcoming on this Friday, March 8th. And I'm going to play a little bit of a promo for it. It's in New York City. So if you're in New York City, New York, check it out. I'll put a link to the show in the show notes, and we'll go over kind of the tickets where you can buy them. But we're also going to talk about another topic. We did an 8-part series on my show, MK Ultra Music is the Weapon. Very well received. We've moved on to another topic, but I do want to promote his show, and this, I believe, is the singer. So So that's a little glimpse of what you would see if you go to the show this Friday, March 8th, 7 p.m. Eastern. And the title of the show is Oneness, Music and Movements, very reasonably priced, $25 each. And it features Utpola Bora as the voice, and then Hans Uter, you saw him playing the sitar there in the video if you're watching this on X, YouTube, or Rockfin. And so please go check it out. I'll put a link to the venue. Is Thompson Avenue, Unit WS11, Long Island City, New York. And so I will have that in the show notes. So if you're in the area and you want to see some Eastern culture with some dancing and music and singing, check it out. So Hans Uter, welcome to the show. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about the show that's coming up on March 8th.
Well, I think it's going to be quite a nice concert. It's combining some different experiential, different types of music, different types of energies or areas to connect with through music that's not that prevalent. And I think it's going to be a great concert. So I appreciate everybody if they can make it out. And I'm doing lots and lots of events, and this is the one that's probably the biggest event, and yet I'm hamstrung by the promotional apparatus. No, it's going to be great, and please come out, and it's going to be a nice show. So that's all.
There's nothing like live music. It really is so much different than listening to it in your home or something. You're in a venue where everybody's quiet, and it's much more intimate, and you can actually see the artist and experience it firsthand. So I always recommend people get out too. It's important to get out, get out and support the artist, right? So you've been busy. You were on kind of a tour, right? Weren't you on a sitar tour?
Yeah. Well, I actually no, it was about 80% guitar stuff. So I'm mostly just playing with like kind of funk, R&B, but pretty, great musicians, kind of demanding actually, real pretty intense type of music. I played in a number of prisons also, so that was fun. So I got So I
did a little Johnny Cash kind of type thing.
Yeah, I did kind of
live from Folsom Prison.
Well, the thing about these prisons is that you have to haul your stuff. I mean, on the outside it doesn't look that big. They're huge inside. They're just huge, at least the ones I've been at. And you got to cart your gear all the way. It's like walking through a mid-sized college campus or something. But
you don't have any roadies, no roadies, huh?
No. It's a good thing to do. I'm glad I'm not in prison. They're super appreciative. I haven't been mobbed. I did make the mistake though of one particular location. They had a guitar. They said I can use a guitar. It looks like a great guitar, at least Fender Strat, like I play, but it had plastic strings. So that's so no one can like
Oh wow.
You can kill somebody with a guitar string
Right.
quite
Right.
easily. So
Right.
these plastic,
That's like a noted way to kill somebody is with a
yeah,
piano wire or something, right?
yeah.
Wow.
So these plastic strings, I mean, it's interesting that I got to actually try to do a show on plastic strings. It's not something I really wish to encounter again. They have a pretty awful tone. They're like bright. They look like day glow, bright orange. But that being said, it's been cool. So just staying pretty busy with a variety of these different things and working on other projects. So it's
Right.
all's well. And
So this one's in the big city, New York, New York. So there you go. So people can go check it out. Get some culture. Oneness, music, and movement. Check it out. But today's show is the title is, and we did that one show just like I mentioned at the intro, the MKL tour Music is the Weapon. It's all an 8-part series. So I set it aside and people can listen to it. I'll put a link to that as well in the show notes, as well as this show, Oneness, Music, and Movement. But today, he's looking into kind of a new subject, advanced Soviet research on cybernetics, biofield, energetics, and cognitive restructuring is his title. So maybe if you want to do an intro to that, or if you still want to mention anything about the sitar, or your shows, please do it now.
well, I'll just say something a little bit briefly. So especially and as going back into doing a variety of type of music for that's my primary livelihood, really seeing that there are absolutely different types of effects that come through music, and also music doesn't necessarily just have to be about shake your groove thing or you know whatever you call it. I mean, just more of a you're going sort of outwards, something that brings you to a calmer state, and and it really opens the mind, and also serves a function of almost healing and regrounding, remodulating. So with this type of music that I'm doing in New York, it's on along those lines. So that's why I would appreciate people coming out. And it doesn't mean that these types of music are bad, but they do affect you. And as you become more aware of that, you see that this is great entertainment, and yet it's depending on what I want to experience in my life, or being aware of how this will modulate it and my consciousness, my mind, how it can have effects on structures and systems in the human body without even me really being aware of it. Just to say, well, I want to see this function of music not just as something that's entertaining, but as something that will bring more to bear in your life, and also something that will serve as just a booster. You know what I mean? People take vitamin supplements. If you listen to classical music and study, they've done many types. So much science on this, including with plants. Also, the classical music, it orders your brain. You have better retention. You have better comprehension. You're able to be more efficient, and you actually enjoy it. Other types of music disrupts that kind of patterning of your mind, disrupts that level. It, if you're, if you're breaking rocks, you're cutting firewood with an axe. Maybe you want to hear something that's real, whatever it may be, some kind of very high energy. But just with the classical music itself, absolutely affects, improves memory, improves overall well-being, intelligence, etc., sensory aptitude, ability to organize, this, that, just from the music itself. And with the plants, studies have been many of them and very famous, but you play certain types of music, certain types, say rock music, other things, the plants will die. It kills the plants. You play classical music, they bloom. Great. They really, they take off, and so that's just a bit about. I have people ask me the question all the time, and I know this is not really much about music in this particular topic at all, but just to say that we take in a lot of inputs into our body and minds that we don't think about, especially under the guise of this is entertaining, or this will make me feel better. That could include certain, like medications. You take a medication, what's it doing? It's alleviating a symptom. It's feeding into a systemic pattern, right? So just to modulate what you take in and say, well, this will affect my consciousness. If I love slasher movies and I'm going to watch a slasher movie, I may enjoy it, but what is that doing to my mind, my consciousness, my endocrine system? It has an impact. It doesn't mean you need to freak out. Doesn't mean you can't even enjoy that, but be aware of it. And if it's not something you wanted, that what's the optimal thing? Do you want to waste your time, or even if you're going to have entertainment or something, do something that's going to be revivifying, that will make you more healthy, more whole, more grounded, more present, more relaxed, and removing some of this invisible conditioning that sort of girds us. We, and this is what I think hopefully I'll be getting into in this brand new topic. So it's a new, there's like a lot of material. I'm just kind of putting it together, but let's dive in.
Yeah, but it makes me think of like Altamont, like we've talked about Altamont and the negativity of that music and how it had an effect. And I always think of, what is it? What's the place where they had in upstate New York where they grouped and there was 1 and 2? It was Woodstock. So Woodstock 1 was relatively peaceful. People were drugged out and stuff like that. But Woodstock 2, they had all the super aggro music, and it like devolved in like the end of the Joker. Like people were burning everything down and all that stuff. So I think it just kind of proves your point. Music is a powerful messenger of good and kind of bad energy or sound, sonic energy, I guess.
Yeah, and really, as we get into this topic, sort of see how far we go. Everything I've been doing is basically just physical sources, and I'm just writing notes on legal pads. So I'll turn it into this more, at least in terms of the PowerPoint. But eventually, towards the end, we'll look at some of these developments that really tie everything together, that allow for an understanding of energies, of interpersonal energies, even of different types of forces and, technologies and connections or disconnections within the individual, within the entire social system. That's really, it creates a scientific background to understand everything I'm talking about very clearly, but also is grounded. It's called social safety, basically, which is the thing. It's a interesting philosophical concept, which I'll get into, which is sort of it shows, it demonstrates that there is something of value to look into this, both from the negative side and the positive side. So we'll dive into this this dimension here. And
sounds good. And then just for people to note, like the Soviets and the Russians were very advanced. Like Pavlov was so influential on modern psychology, and this is like the 20s and 30s, if not the turn of the century. So, some people may think like they're not as sophisticated. Maybe that's not the case.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation or disinformation or whatever the new term is, used for this. But the fact is that before the Russian Revolution, you had a tremendous amount of prosperity, tremendous, huge gross domestic product, almost no crime, a very high trust society, and this has been distorted. But as we'll get into this, the important thing about Russia or USSR or this contiguous multi-state region, which is what it really is, and it has been, from the beginning, it's neither. So you can look at Western sort of scientific materialism, this empirical framing, everything is material. This ties in, of course, to the global brain, which is the new initiative, the Global Brain Initiative. This is all connected with that. But the the whole area that we are able to experience, encompass, or not, and the degree to which not only is culture manipulated, but the degree to which that we lack basic understandings of how we actually function and what we actually are. This is really important. So you can try to fix a system, but if you're trying to change, say someone has a psychological issue, whatever it may be, maybe they're whatever, just pick your particular condition, but a lot of that is going to be based on recurrent thought structures. You just talk about your thoughts, you're never going to change it if this is happening physiologically, right? This is a neurophysiological system or syndrome. If you're just trying to use verbal discourse, talk about what's happening, say this, that, get some, it's not going to change anything. It may have mild changes, but it's really not going to change the fundamental system because it's operating in a different dimension that can easily be accessed. But if you don't know what is actually going on inside of you, what you actually are, what is the totality of you as a human organism, not you as, your, name, identity, whatever, but the lack of this basic knowledge, that when it becomes clear, it's very clear. And I think it's a fundamental importance. And this really hardcore scientific stuff, as we go through and look at this, I'm going to try to show the parallel between what is going on in the United States or Western Europe and what is going on in the USSR. And you'll see almost like a dance, like an inverse mirroring. Okay. And as things are being left out or things brought in, look at psychology became completely all these, maybe wonderful theories, Gestalt, you've got Kleinian analysis, you've got, Neo-Freudianism, you got cognitive, but all these things, they're based on verbal narrative. And they're also based on models or belief systems about the human mind. They're all theories. We do not really understand the human mind or the human brain, period. Whatever they say, it is not mapped. These are which greater or lesser degrees of truth, but they're maps or models, right? The really hardcore research was done, Luria, Pavlov, many other scientists in the 1920s. We could look at the International Physiologists Conference. We look at these international physiology conferences. We look at the neural research, things like that. But what they were doing was based on actual scientific data and actual results and based on underlying foundational mechanisms. Okay. I don't know if this makes
right. Yeah, no, I did a show with Joel Dinsmore. He had a book, Dark Persuasion, and when the first section was about Pavlov, Pavlov was financed by Stalin and Lenin, and they in St. Petersburg, I guess it became Leningrad, right? Or Stalingrad, but they had 250 people working there, so it was like a huge, like almost a medical facility or hospital size of just doing psychological research.
This was really, really advanced. And another thing is that there's two specific areas where the West, or what we call the West, which I'll get into that also, with all these subversions of various organizations and societal structures. But in Western research, there was a very reductionist empiricism, and there's also which just means you're reducing everything to a very limited common denominator, but it's extremely narrow focus, and you're also disregarding all kinds of other phenomena. And you're also limiting everything to just a very localized or isolated subsystem and not seeing the overall effect. So you can affect the pancreas. You can have certain effects on the the thyroid, the parathyroid. You have effects on the limbic brain. You have effects on pulse rate, blood vessel dilation. You have all these different things. These can all create psychological states, but they're predicated upon the physical systems and these reductionists. But the actual research, there are replications. Like we look at all the psychological experiments, like Stanley Milgram, right? But this, there was a but psi phenomena, but not just in a bracketed off space, like men who stare at goats. There, it's not integrated because you have to really, you can't hang on to either this very very narrow reductionist approach, and you also can't hang on to these BS mental construction theoretical approaches. And some of them may not be BS, but there's so many things, identity therapy, this, that, I mean, God knows. These are all they're just ideas. I can come up with lots of ideas. We all have great ideas, but it's just a system, and it's also a method of conditioning the individual to see, if you just use a Freudian approach to your mind, what are you going to think you are? If you're just using it, you're just a bunch of randomly collected cells that came from some amoeba or piece of plankton, which is Darwinism, which is, Darwinism and Marxism are intimately bound up. They're almost the same thing. And interestingly enough, Karl Marx, the first edition, first publication, he mailed it to Charles Darwin.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow.
And the inscription, which this is,
I'm not surprised.
From memory, it's not, this could be, well, this is not the exact whatever it is, but it basically said, without your work, this, I never could have begun.
Wow,
I hope you
amazing.
appreciate this offering to the great master, or so, of those along those lines. But so these are the systems of which we will get into this particular political party in Russia that ended in 2009. We'll get into that towards the end. This is really interesting. I mean, it's an amazing model or system. But anyways, if you believe in the theory of evolution, first of all, everything is material. Everything is random chaos. You have no specific purpose. You're just a biological organism. Fight or flight, the will to power, the will to dominance, conflict of the species, natural selection, social Darwinism. But everything is mechanistic and deterministic. Great example. You take a watch apart. Does that watch self-assemble into another functioning Rolex? No. It's just going to be a bunch of parts. It's going to sit there. Do you ever see anything? Okay, I'm going off on a tangent there, but this is an example of some of these conceptual limitations. But the important thing with Russia was, it's very prosperous, but also it was, it has that unique, for the outward directed, scientifically based Western materialist cultures, and the inner journey, so to speak, looking at the spiritual side, focusing inside, not outside of Asia, right, or the East, quote unquote. Russia is neither, gives a very powerful perspective, but also has been subject to tremendous amount of violence that we could only imagine. So anyways, I'll leave it there.
Well, I just found like a link as an academic paper says the contacts between Karl Marx and Charles Darwin. So it just says they became aware of each other in indirect and direct ways. The history of their relations has been told differently and only in part. So this paper goes into it. I can't see the whole thing, but looks interesting.
A lot of people don't know that at all, right? I mean, they never met, but right there you say they lived 20 miles away, but they never met. How do we know they never met?
Well, good point.
You know,
Yeah, I
how do
mean,
you're just making a statement.
right. This article even admits this is what we know, right? This is what we know now. But it seems like Marx knew Huxley, so if he knew Huxley, he knew Darwin, right?
And you got, well, and of course, Charles Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin. So they were, this is the, the social conditioning, really setting the stage, but coming from this idea of the eugenics, British eugenics, which ties right into the Soviet Union and these other elements. So yeah, let's just hit the PowerPoint. Let's move in and see what I pulled together.
Sounds good.
You do the next slide. Okay. So just like I said, it's a new topic for me. I'm sort of a challenge. I know what I know, but I haven't really formulated. So this is going to be a little bit of just going through this. So it should hopefully be of interest. As we said already, unique and important research done in USSR and Russia. No limitations of human subjects, no limitations on human subjects, including children. So you can do types of experiments that you could do in a clandestine way in the United States, right? You could do in certain types of, but you couldn't do this long time observation. You couldn't integrate into their schools and just apply this stuff to, you know what I mean? You couldn't do it. And there's a lot of stuff Pavlov did with kids. It was just really, that's how we went from dogs to children, And
Right,
so this is, and we're looking at electrical chemical signal processing like Luria. So anyways, okay, advanced research, psychopolitics. So psychology of the political. Everyone's probably seen that Yuri Brezhnev interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I've watched it like 3 times.
Yeah, and the one thing about him, which is he's quite interesting. I could never, I could never get any really detailed more information besides what was related in those shows. But that's just one example. That's a psychopolitics. That's one level, but really being able to understand this and to see that the self-generating nihilistic attitude, nihilistic perception, right, creates this complete social collapse, which we're witnessing right now in the United States, obviously, in a pretty advanced manner. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, there's Bezmenov right here, like died at 53, but yeah, he's got a history. He defected. Disillusioned with the Soviet system. Went to Canada, yeah. But his discussions are they're like academic, they're scholarly.
Just a kind of a fun fact about him is that when he decided to defect, do you know how he defected? He became a hippie. He blended into the hippie subculture, and it took him a while to get out, but he had to go through this like underground thing, and he had to become a hippie. And he was not a hippie, right? He was the opposite of a hippie, but this is how he managed to disappear and escape. And so it's kind of a funny story, but yeah,
wow, interesting, yeah.
But that's an example of just a small taste of the psychopolitics of really how to make massive changes in very subtle, sometimes very direct, but in ways that have tremendous impact, and had to do it across a whole array of different cultural structures, social structures, media, education, et cetera, and anyway, it quite powerful for sure. So there's life in India.
Yeah, but just like the sophistication of the Russian kind of spies and things like that was always top notch. Like their whole psychological operations against countries all around the world, capitalism, things like that is really something else. Like they know how to destabilize. Well, the CIA is good at it too, actually. But a lot of the residents, the citizens, the hoi polloi don't realize these elements of psychological warfare that are being used against them. Maybe they sense it kind of liminally, but it's interesting to see a guy like lay out the blueprint like Bezmenov did.
Yeah, well, it is that sense, the sense of really what he, unless there's other literature, I tried to watch, most of the videos. It was mostly once you've got the main points, that I didn't get it really an expansion of that, but it's really, it's emotional. It's an emotional cognitive and semantic, in that it's a way of getting how you get meaning. What's your meaning processing, right? How do you process words and images? How are these being valenced or spun? So it's done very specifically, and we're looking at information, so to speak, which ties into cybernetics theory. Information being what's being conveyed. It could be a show. It could be a movie that's very prominent, that has this sense that it's America is a dying empire. It's a decaying culture. People are evil. It's all war. We're global warming. We're all going to die. We're going to die from swine flu. We'll die from this or that. But also behind that, the fear is a sense of just give up. It's hopeless, or help to destroy this evil system as a more extreme.
Right. I mean, how much of that is a component of leftist thinking now, right? I mean, isn't that it? Like, this whole thing is over, and let's work to undermine it.
Oh, absolutely. It just as a footnote or an aside, if you look at the CIA, though, what they do, they destabilize things, but it's usually pretty blunt and pretty obvious once you know to look for, and it's very instrumental. Like, we want this done, we'll do it within this period of time, and it's going to be. And a lot of times it really involves funding factional militias. You can look at all the color revolutions. Yeah, there was some, media social conditioning going on, but done in a pretty rapid fire way, and done towards immediate directed action, and done with many, many different types of agents, including people that are kinetic, that are doing bombings, that are doing disruptions, that are paid protesters, et cetera, et cetera.
Like the Chile overthrow, 73 Allende overthrow was very rapid, kinetic, right? Shocking. I would use that example.
And in terms of the United States, we're looking at something completely different, right? You're looking at something that's going over the long term. While there may be things happening here and there may be some, look at the Weather Underground, man. Bill Ayers. I mean, you want to talk about actual terrorists. They set off bombs in the Pentagon. They had bombings that killed people. They were talking about poisoning water supplies of major cities and literally killing tens of millions of people, and not talking about it like one of the FBI sting operations with some either mentally ill jihadist guy works in a bunch of guys that work in gas stations.
Agent provocateur. Yeah, they were really in it. Chesa Boudin, who was like this horrible prosecutor in San Francisco, his parents went to jail for killing a Brinks armored car guy while they were robbing him. That's what they were, revolutionaries.
Well, there's interesting interviews, or a couple of interviews with this guy who was a undercover agent in the Weather Underground for like a couple decades, right? And what he describes, and he says these are people with PhDs. These are people from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, these type of institutions. And these are people that are very pragmatic, goal-oriented, and absolutely ruthless. So when they say we want to kill this many people in these major cities, they mean it. And they have the means and ability to do it.
Yeah, no, Ayers talked about we got to get rid of a third of the population of the United States. He has that recorded in audio or something like that. Like some crazy amount. Like that's what they were considering. Like, oh yeah, we got to get rid of all these guys.
But look at this guy. Like this guy was. You have other people. There's lots of people that have been. There's a lot of political prisoners in America. Some on the left, many on the right. Whatever you want to say. Many of whom are absolutely innocent. Okay, at least they're not innocent of ideological thought crimes or this or that, but they are innocent of stuff like Bill Ayers did, who became a highly respected member of the community, no jail time, went underground. How did he stay underground for that long? You know, there were obviously, yeah. So we'll go into that.
He was protected. He was protected. So was Ayers, and wasn't it? What was his female sidekick? I forgot her name. Yeah, season of the fork, whatever she said. She was influenced by Manson. Actually, she said that.
Well,
it's Bernadine Dorn.
Bernadine Dorn. Yes. Well, you know, the thing is that part of this systemic thing, and this is outside this topic, but I'm looking at these sort of historical things, incidents, the way things are brought together, where particular traumas are revisited. Oppenheimer movie, revisiting nuclear war, revisiting the atomic test sites, revisiting the road of death, the Highway del Norte, right? The Highway of Death that ends at the Trinity site. The Highway of Death that was built in 1857 by Beale, the colonel in the army, and they this Masonic architect dude put this gates of death, on this high. This is an ancient road. It became. I forget that it's not Route 666, I don't think, or Route 66, but it became an actual road, and etc. Anyways, let me get back on point here. So,
by the way, just one more point: Ayers and Dorn were the legal guardians of Chesapeake, who took part in destroying San Francisco with his crazy, stupid ideas. And I got recalled. Like people said, this guy's looped. I mean, he's actually super smart. Academically, his academic career is like first rate, but ideas put in practice, that's the real problem with the left and all their ideological claptrap, is like you actually put it into practice, it doesn't work.
Well, these guys, the thing is that there's people that have done really nothing, put up flyers or, been set up. I think even, some of these people, Mumia Abdul-Jamal, as I've learned more, I don't know, maybe he is innocent. Leonard Peltier, who I met as a child.
Mumia Abdul-Jamal is not even close to being innocent.
Okay,
I've looked at that case. It's complete nonsense. He was caught with a gun. He admitted he did it. He shot the cop over like a traffic ticket. It was crazy. He deserves to be in jail. Like this, that's another left. I mean, right wing has its own kind of phantasms, but that's like a left wing. This guy's oppressed when he was the real oppressor. You kill a cop, you're an oppressor.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But so there you go. But the way it's framed, but look at Bill Ayers. I mean, the guy is a professor, no jail time. He actually probably killed many people or ordered people. They did many bombings. There was, they had affiliated sub organizations, and they were real militants, and they were
real militants. And they were responsible, by the way, interestingly enough, one of their raids on an FBI office exposed to the world the COINTEL program. It was because they got in and got those paperwork that we know the FBI was involved in so much naughty, dirty stuff. But they were involved in all kinds of stuff. They were on the run. They got Leary out of jail. They were responsible for that. So jail breaks and all kinds of stuff. They were in Algeria with Leary. So he had direct connection with Bernie.
Really? That I did not know they're connected. Yeah. Because the Leary and Algeria is so, it's very important, at least in terms of the, other dimensional sort of.
Right. The Crowley connection is no doubt, because Leary is in, for people who don't know, he was in the oasis of Boo Sada like Crowley. And he stated, I showed that in my book, Children of the Beast, where he says, the synchronicities between my life and Crowley are incredible. And he really recognized him as carrying on Crowley's work. There's no question about it.
Yeah. No, Leary was channeling, it was completely admitting that with the right, if Lucius, 1905, is as with Leary, where he fed people mushrooms, magic mushrooms. They think they're, and again, it's using entertainment as ritual working. So, and but what is Leary's philosophy? Turn on, tune in, drop out. I mean, what is that? It, it's you get a high, you get some kind of a state from a drug. Is what is that doing? Is that making any changes? Is what's so cool about having like freaking out and having hallucinations? Is that really cool? That you're psychotic, you're having delusory disorders, you're hallucinating things. Now, maybe you get some spiritual state from the psychedelic. Well, if that spiritual state is real, that can and must be and should be obtained through your own life and through becoming more healthy, becoming more purified, becoming more connected through divine grace, whatever it may be, not by popping a pill.
Right. He's
But
like the original pill popper. And that's kind of what people complained to him about. He actually said this is the LSD is the super highway to spiritual enlightenment. So he sold all this drug. He was the Johnny Appleseed. He turned it into a spiritual event instead of just being high as a kite. So he was the one who kind of put the new age spin on it, like you're attaining salvation through LSD or whatever. And Guy was a total garbage head at the end of his life. Leary was just on all kinds of drugs. You can see him in some of his speeches. He's clearly coked up. He's coked up to the gills. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a very funny thing he does with super primitive virtual reality, and this is around, which would be actually be interesting. We were doing that stuff for like the dead and all that, So this is around, I think it's a little bit before that, but the way he puts it on, he's like, you could probably look up that clip on YouTube, but I don't. Some things I've seen a long time ago. I don't want to exaggerate it, but it's pretty entertaining actually. you know, Especially with the level of the virtual reality, in the early '90s, late '80s, or whatever. It's like, did you find a
Let
clip?
me see if I can find that clip. But like some of these, he's just total. Like there's a clip of just high as a kite. He's giving a speech. I don't know if it's the Christian minister, but there's the one where this is the one where he famously says, this is the one. It won't show up. Yeah. It's carrying on the work of Crowley.
Well, what you see with both Leary and Hugh Hefner have sort of a similar physiognomy almost, right?
Yeah.
Because in a certain way they're not they're not the rulers, they're not in charge of everything, but they have an important role and they relish their role.
I think you're right. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right.
It-
As change agents, as counterculture figures. Hefner's carrying on Kinsey, right? So they're both kind of in this kind of like pushing society forward type thing.
well, this whole thing also of counterculture, this as we go into this topic, we'll see that. Look at that term, counterculture. It's not counter oppressive, socioeconomic systems. It's counterculture. Culture is what? Culture is the whole system and structure of embedded values. So you do counterculture, you're going to end up with nothing.
Right. I mean, it kind of was. It was like it's turned out to be very destructive. I think Timothy Leary gives the CIA full credit for starting the counterculture movement. I mean, that's even more sinister. I don't know if he's high here, but there's one where I got to find this clip of him. Maybe I have it in my archives.
But he's like such a he just looks like an actor in like a B sci-fi movie. Hello, I am Rithilon from the planet. And notice that
You're right,
there are all those UFO cults, right? With people
Yeah.
that acted just like Leary, even looked like Leary. You know,
it's pretty wild. Like he's friends with Robert Anton Wilson. He's got the whole panspermia concept. He's he's just got all kinds of strange things about his ideas and stuff. Illuminated, hanging out with Burroughs. Let me see if I can find his high as a kite clip.
I'm not.
Do you know that he had? Do you know that he had a face job? Like he was vain. Like he wanted to make sure he looked good, like for his role.
So he had plastic surgery. Okay.
Yeah. Here's something from my files. I got something between him and Bernardine Dorn. This is a letter. September 15th, 1970. This is the fourth communication from the Weather Underground. The Weather Underground has an honor and pleasure of helping Dr. Timothy Leary escape from the POW camp at San Luis Obispo, California. Dr. Leary was being held against his will and against the will of millions of kids in this country. He was a political prisoner captured for the work he did in helping all of us begin the task of creating a new culture on the barren wasteland that has been imposed on this country by Democrats, Republicans, capitalists, and creeps. LSD and grass, like the herbs and cactus and mushrooms of the American Indians and countless civilizations that have existed on this planet, will help us make a future world where it will be possible to live in peace. We are now at war with MI5 and North Vietnamese, with Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine and Al Fatah, with Ron Brown and Angela Davis, with all black and brown revolutionaries, the Soledad brothers, and all prisoners of war in American concentration camps. Make possible the destruction of U.S. imperialists. Our organization commits itself to the task of freeing these prisoners of war. We are outlaws. We are free. Bernadette Dorn.
And a lot of people got out of that. Those movements that were guilty of real crimes, slap on the wrist, and not only slap on the wrist, but social prestige, wealth, prominence, fame. And one last thing, just since we're talking about LSD, is that, or these psychedelics, is that you can go out and have a beer. You can even, of course, fentanyl is a little bit different, or all these pill mills where people are dying outright. But you can probably do coke a couple times. You won't. Of course, I'm not recommending this. I'm saying, okay, cannabis, whatever. But the thing is, with these psychedelics, there is a risk that, yes, you can. What I'm saying, you can physically die, right, from certain substances. But what other substance has a risk of permanent psychosis or permanent mental damage? Permanent mental damage just from once. Okay, maybe it's a small percentage of the population, but it's not that small, right? And many people, and if you follow this pathway, the likelihood of something like that happening increases. For what? Okay, anyways, go ahead.
Well, here's the clip that mentions Crowley. You should be able to, the people listening should be able to hear him.
I can hear it.
Talk. Okay.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. Crowley said, "Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law."
There it is. And then I found the one where he's high as a kite. Do you want to see it?
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay, let's see. Let's bring it up. He is absolutely high as a kite on this one. Let's get this removed. Present. Share screen. No, that's not it. I have to share the video file. Then the audio goes through. Timothy Leary at the nightclub.
Please allow me to represent myself to you.
Watch it.
I practice a most peculiar and risky profession. I'm a genetic robot. The DNA code, that's the biological intelligence, has wired me, fired me, inspired me, wound me up to stand up in front of people and say out loud the things that you intelligent people think but are too intelligent to say out loud. Now, with due praise to the shady lady profession, I like to think that my profession is one of the oldest and most honorable in human history. The first thing we have to do is we have to stay as high altitude as possible. So that we can look down at Rome and at Athens and at London and at Washington, D.C. Ha ha. And then, when the moment is right, at that trembling membrane moment when the present meets the past and the future, we zap down to a place like this and we tell you exactly what's going to happen. We tell you things that nobody else will allow to tell you. And we get out of town before we get busted. Now, here we have a map of the world which shows that for the last 4,000 years, you know this to be true, civilization, freedom, intelligence, genetics has been moving in an unbroken line from east to west. And you'll notice that California is being split off here.
I don't know how much you want to hear this, but to me, he's pretty clearly on something.
He's completely whacked out. He's doing like a low rent Neil Diamond type of, or Elvis, he's got the jumpsuit.
Yeah.
He sees himself as he is intoxicated with his own fame and the power he has over the audience. And he's just, he's not, he's giving you the excuse to be high all the time and think you're becoming some, angel. If you look up, I did see there's a hour and a half documentary. I just pulled that up. It's Leary. It's LSD and virtual reality. Huh. And so I have not seen that, but he's a big, huge promoter of the global brain, of virtual reality, of what, right?
Yeah, we could do a full show on him. I've got the video. I just found it, the video of him promoting the early internet. Like, he was kind of a forward thinker, kind of like Arthur C. Clarke, actually, where they're like, this is the future. We can sense the future through this thing.
Well, this is psychopolitics, right? Yeah. This is introducing ideas over a long span of time, right? Through science fiction. Very important. Marvin Minsky from the Cybernetics, whatever, neuroscientist, he talks about science fiction, how important science fiction is. But he also says in this interview that Siri was developed in the 1970s.
Wow. We just talked about Minsky. We did a show with Sean McCann. I did a show with Sean McCann, and Minsky popped up. So
okay.
It's the second time. Minsky connected to Kubrick, connected to Clark, connected to Epstein, actually. Believe it or not. Not in a good way. All right, where is he? I had this one of Leary with this. He's like on a computer. Crazy. I don't know. I don't know if I can find it.
Well, for people who are just listening, I mean, Leary is just over the top, legs spread all over. He's doing the rock star. He's acting like a rock star.
It's a rock star, yeah.
Yeah, but he has that kind of that hedonism, the decadence, and the total control. But anyways, so I'll continue with that first slide here. So psychopolitics, and that's actually some examples of that, right? It's politics by other means. Film, music, media, a lot of very interesting research and development of cinema. And like Eisenstein, this example, film form, I may come into this, but really interesting breakdowns of how film affects the mind and stuff like that. It pretty advanced understanding. Some of this relates to the music, but also there's a lot of people promoting this stuff in the West. I wouldn't be surprised if we look in the Leary, we might find connections with him as well, because the Weather Underground certainly did. Farmstead actor. Okay. Human Biofield. This is what's, we'll get into that towards the end of this, however long this goes. But the Human Biofield is it's a very powerful, I think it's an understanding. It's not a imposition, but it's the whole interconnection of the human being with the environment, with the entire earth itself, with all other systems, with explaining a lot of these different things that have been relegated to airy fairy, new age, whatever circles, right? So that this is quite interesting. So group dynamics, really understanding group dynamics, creating groups, creating percentages in a population that will steer the entire population. It's very powerful. You get a certain percentage of people that are, espousing a particular type of behavior and ideology, and they're connected. You can make that spread out to much wider portions of the society. Look at the corona thing, right? I mean, that's an example of where ultimately, really, it's imaginary, right? Do you see people actually dying on the street? Is it like the plague? I always brought up that Monty Python thing, bring out your dead, bring out your dead. It wasn't, but in the mind, everyone, you know what I mean? So
this is Leary and the Grateful Dead. You'll get a kick out of this.
Oh, cool.
The Human Being of 1967. Leary. Leary's back. And Leary section. Weir, Bob Weir. There's Jerry. Where's Leary? Come on, Tim. He shows up somewhere. I think he might be on stage with them. This is like a seminal event. 67, Haight-Ashbury. That guy looks familiar, isn't that?
Is that Brian Jones? It looks like Brian Jones.
Come on, I know Leary's in here somewhere. I thought he was in here. I guess not. There's how psychedelic this is. I thought this was a Leary clip, but it is an interesting timestamp. I can't figure this out.
Well,
Trying to convert something.
Yeah, one thing to note in that, though, the people, except for the few ecstatic faces that, who, for all we know, could be actors, maybe not, but most people look like almost zombies. You don't really see this. It's like they're all under a trance. They're kind of lifeless, don't you think?
Yes.
You look at the audience, they're walking around. I mean, they're not full of vivacity and energy that's creating this new world. Maybe they're tripping out on their own heads, or just, and you can see the music, it has that kind of almost stagnating effect. It creates a very closed field or a system. So, and this is one thing that's very important to gather, and which is obviously interrelated to this topic, is that a lot of this rebellious music of freedom, the rock itself is a product of this industrial culture. So you're not really, it's like you're not getting out of society. You're not getting out of the mental programming. You're in a little kid's romper room and you're still in the building. And maybe you're down in the basement of the building, but you're not out of the building.
No way.
Leary, it's like, think about it. It's like Leary has an office, down in the basement. You go hang out with Leary, and then you go into your romper room and you're just bouncing around in your own head and think you're actually doing something in the world. And anyways, so.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
But okay, group dynamics and then mental and physiological restructuring. So I've alluded to that already. So yeah, we had a lot of the, Pavlov and Luria and many other people, and also John Lilly, looking at how his research is offshoots. So you have certain things, that are interplaying. We'll get into that later, but with the cybernetic system theory, with the current global brain, I think we can trace it, including the decline of America and the West as in its totality, to a lot of these things. So
I agree. Let's see if I can bring up this file with Leary in front of a computer. Let's see. EF, where is it? Evolution of intelligence. I guess it's not here. Where it is. Cancel. Anyway, go ahead. Let me see if I can get this to load up. EABCD. There it is. Okay. This is Leary like in front of a computer. Can you hear that?
Yes.
My name is Timothy Leary, and I'm a philosopher and a scientist. But I should abbreviate or punctuate that by saying I'm a humanist, philosopher, scientist. That is, I think that the human spirit is the key to evolution and knowledge. And the theme of my work and my life is the evolution of intelligence. Now that distinguishes me from those philosophers and scientists who believe, for example, that, humanity can't evolve very quickly. It takes millions of years to change. Or that the golden ages were in the past, in Rome or in Greece, or when some religious leader walked the earth.
You can kind of see his similar shtick, right? From the talk show to this kid's like, he brings up Rome and Greece and the ancient civilizations.
I believe that human intelligence is evolving very quickly, particularly these days. And I think that everyone in this room, in our lifetimes, can go through as many changes and metamorphoses and mutations as the butterflies go from cocoons to caterpillars to beautiful, colored, high-flying creatures.
Obviously, we have to have importance cannot.
See, this is him in front of a computer.
Today, the most important tool for self-growth and independence of thought is the personal computer. In my lectures, I use history, anecdote, illustrations from pop culture, social satire, and the cleansing power of intelligent laughter to prepare students for the information age. In my lectures and in question and answer periods, I introduce the audience to new programs which convert personal computers into machines for self-development. These programs, called headwear, encourage independent thinking, they expand consciousness, and they produce higher levels of imagination. They are powerful, they are safe, and so far, they're still legal. Space is one of the futures.
So that's just him. Evolution of intelligence. Yeah.
You know what's it's interesting is that Jerry uses the same argument. He says that virtual reality is the next LSD. Use it before it's made illegal. The man will try to stop us from going into virtual reality. The man's going to stop you. So it's like if you imagine the house, whatever metaphorical institution I have for, say, American social structure, and you can be on certain floors, you can go down the back alley, but if you think you're escaping, you're running out the basement exit, and you get Leary, and then, oh, you got this, that. Maybe you go into some kind of weird occult stuff, or maybe you end up at the virtual reality room. That's probably the lowest, you know what I mean, phase. Like where are you? Virtual reality? How is this increasing your intelligence? It's atrophying your intelligence, right? You can create virtual realities if, higher level mind people, with a higher abilities of visualization or other things like that. These are abilities that we have without any, you don't need to have a machine to do it. In fact, the machine is intrusive, but anyways, so, but yeah, this is it's interesting to see Leary because information age, right? This idea, information, like the show The Prisoner. Have you seen that show?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't seen it in a while though, but I need to.
That
Mr. Number 7 or whatever his name was.
Yeah.
Right.
But the Prisoner, where he's taken and kidnapped and held on this island, and it's a total surveillance state. He goes through all these different iterations where he thinks he's escaping, several which do involve like hallucinogenic drugs, some of which involve all kinds of, mind control technologies and techniques, information. But he was a British Secret Service agent. He's kidnapped the people around him. here's where we see this intersecting nexus, right? So just I want to state that I talk about infiltration, the United States or Europe. There's an overarching hierarchy that was or particular power centers that have always been outside of this, and they were connected at the beginning of this and have continued. So, it doesn't mean that the Soviets had so much more advanced and much more subtle methods, right? Instead of just arming a bunch of crazy guerrillas with some coked up, propped up leader, like, that goes to acting school, just to run, or like some Zelensky type human clown that plays piano with his thingamajig. I mean, it's like, but these people are perfect. They're coked up. They're completely ego driven. They want the power. They're like Leary. How many lives do you think he directly contributed to being totally destroyed from taking LSD? Even 2 or 3 or 4 steps removed. I would say probably, I'm just a total guesstimate. I would say at least in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. I don't know.
Yeah, no, he was a heavy drug user. He almost was like on par with like supposedly Lenin. Like Leary at the last stages on his way out, LSD, what is it? The balloons are full of what's
Nitrous.
the stuff nitrous oxide, weed, drugs, everything. Like that was his way out. That's once he realized, I think he died of like cancer or something like that. But yeah, I think there's actually a documentary of him in his last days, but heavy duty user of all kinds of different stuff.
Cool. Well, we can move on. I'll just get
Right,
through a few more of these. Okay. Well, we're probably getting a little bit further on here. So
Margaret Mead and Bateson, they keep popping up. NLP keeps popping up in my research too.
Okay. So so cybernetics, this is just an example of how cybernetics stuff was purportedly kind of discredited, sort of passe, disappeared in the United States. Russia continued with all this work, but this ties into everybody. Cerebral inhibition from the first Macy conference, cerebral inhibition, meaning hypnosis affecting, which is one of the major of the work done in Russia. You can't confuse someone mentally, but you can also use language, which is kind of what NLP is. You're using language and as a means to directly affect the human processing and consciousness or ability to be conscious or not conscious, etc. So that's really important. And because it's able to work on neurophysiological symptoms that are, generally speaking, pre-verbal. And with this over-reliance on lexical thinking and thought, talking to yourself in your head, this is promoted, losing that visual or right half of the brain with the imagination. You're kind of at the mercy of a lot of these things. And that's how people can get caught up with a clown like Leary. They don't have the discernment to recognize that you're not getting enlightenment from this drug. Even as an argument, what if everybody, and Huxley, of course, many people argued for this, but he was the main progenitor, is that everyone is high on this drug, all the problems of the world are just going to disappear. But don't worry about the problems. Just go in your own head, man. Put on the Grateful Dead and just go on psychedelic journeys.
Yeah, my favorite is like the South Park one where there's the Fish concert where they're like, we're against the man, but they're all just getting wasted and high. I guess Fish is the carry on from the dead, right? I guess Fish is the next band, but
yeah,
there's a really funny South Park episode kind of that fits that, like where they're clearly not doing anything. They're just getting high, egoistically getting high as a kite.
Well, it's really intense drug use in as far as what I've heard in my research.
Fish concerts.
Yeah, Fish was like even a step above Grateful Dead in terms of that. I'm going to be right back. You can just continue.
Yeah, no problem. I actually let me see if I can finally take a break.
Sure.
I was watching this Fish concert just to the audience, and wasn't a Fish concert. It was a guy like who poked his eyes out at a Fish concert. He was so high. And I don't know, if you want to show that. I don't know if I want to show that on this show, but it's dangerous, man. There's some heavy duty drugs out there, especially if you're mixing drugs. But like a lot of people go into that thinking these are harmless, and it's just not the case. Like I've known people who are not the same after following the dead and, using a lot of psychedelics. They're just, it's why it's called acid, right? Because you get kind of acid wash, acid tread. But I've come across NLP. I don't know if people have heard my show. I did a show on, it was a show that was about the communication between George Estabrooks and J. Edgar Hoover in 1935, 1936 about hypnosis. But one of the other people that was involved kind of in their communication was a guy, a lot of people may not know his name, but it was Erickson was his last name. Really a super genius, really smart guy, psychiatrist, but the developer of NLP. And so this is all kind of pre-MK Ultra. MK Ultra's starting point is known 1953, right? And you have the precursors, which are Artichoke and Bluebird. I'm talking about Erickson. I don't know if you've heard the name Erickson, but he was
Milton Erickson.
Milton Erickson.
Yeah,
he's the founder of NLP. He really was the guy who kind of.
Well, I mean, NLP was, it was a hybrid, right, between you have Bandler and Grinder. So Virginia Satir, you have Bateson stuff primarily, which is he's a very interesting character because both him and Margaret Mead, a lot of what they did was, was behind the scenes.
Interesting.
But language, related to language conditioning, conversation stuff. A lot of Bateson's books are just, I've got all of his lectures, and he's kind of like a Leary, but a maybe much more sedate British version of Leary. But he doesn't really say anything. But this is Ericksonian hypnosis. You embed the command structure into discourse subtly, and you can do it by changing rate of speech, by emphasizing certain words, and also creating, I've got all these pretty funny, like self-help, self-hypnosis tapes done by Bandler in like the 80s when he does all the music. It's just, and I think he's like whacked out on coke. It's completely, and super psychedelic. You can see him in the studio, the voice is going here and there and just really trippy stuff. But even his speeches, he'll talk and he'll just bring up these stories that they're almost like non sequitur. They're entertaining, but even kind of like the way Leary is discoursing, there's not really a coherent thread. But
interesting.
They can, within that kind of discourse, especially, which is Ericksonian hypnosis, primarily, is that you can you can create a very powerful hypnotic state where people are not even aware of it.
No.
And some of these kind of blither blather, like Leary, it's all sunshine, but even that butterfly. And when he says the butterfly, the colorful,
the monarch, right?
Monarch program. Yeah.
Monarch program right in front of your face.
Yeah.
How much does he know? He was a psychologist, right? So he has to be kind of privy or at least exposed to, he knows Huxley, right? So he knows the ultimate revolution. He has to know he's affiliated with the CIA. He has to know at least a glimmer of some of this stuff. Esther Brooks, Milt Erickson, all that stuff. I mean, he's got to know some of it.
And that stuff, was around. I'm sure, there's a lot
of
at
Harvard. He was part of the Human Ecology Fund, right? So that's what was financing a lot of this MK Ultra stuff in the 60s. He was associated with it.
And Bateson, helped to, in a certain way, Bateson gave the theoretical or structural grounding for Ericksonian hypnosis. How does it work? Why does it work? And Milton Erickson
just to interrupt, but on Erickson is interesting because it's interesting we're talking about this because it was Black Vault, I think, is the website that does all of these FOIA things, and there were the FOIA Esther Brooks. Oh, it was actually J. Edgar Hoover's file but it was, or Esterbrook's FBI file. And there was this huge correspondence between George Esterbrook and J. Edgar Hoover about hypnosis in 1935. That's when it starts. So Esterbrook is at Colgate, right? Upstate New York. I think he's in Hamilton, New York. But he's talking, and there's heavy correspondence, right? This is pre-internet. There's back and forth, and all the heads of the FBI are CC'd on these conversations where Esterbrook is trying to explain to these FBI bigwigs about the importance of hypnosis and the ability to apply it into investigative police work, right? And then it like changes, and then Milton Erickson gets involved, and so then it expands into the whole heads of the FBI and all these other mind control doctors or all these other kind of psychologists. And then it clicks with J. Edgar Hoover. He starts, well, if you can do this, what can you do for malevolent purposes? So the light goes off in J. Edgar Hoover's head in 1936 or 1937. He gets it. He understands Esterbrook. So when you see J. Edgar Hoover in the 60s, he knows everything about hypnosis and mind control, or at least from the Esterbrook's perspective at that time. And it's really something else that Erickson pops in there. So people are more exposed to NLP than they might even comprehend. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, NLP is something that it becomes like a buzzword, and people don't really know what it is and don't really understand the principles, techniques, theories, and practices. I have some of the original publications and the hard, leather-bound editions, and they're all mathematical formulas on how this stuff works. It's not like, famous NLP books like Frogs and the Princes, which are, and a variety of other books that are, they're just dialogues, right? It's just him talking to patients, which is exactly like Bateson's writings, which is like the cybernetic stuff, but they just have these dialogues, right? Conversations, which I always never got much out of. But, then you have your third, fourth generation, goes to self-help, it goes into this, that, but the real foundational stuff was, really, it's this information systems theory also, right? So it's this, noise, signal noise ratio, et cetera, et cetera. And then, anyways, and so of course the information system theory ties into the global brain, which Mr. Klaus Schwab is just talking about again. And of course this, idea, nothing new under the sun, or things are new under the sun, but you mentioned that stuff, research on hypnosis, and I forget the name of the source. I'll have to track it down again, but this guy's talking about sort of Manchurian candidates type of people with dissociative identities that can be triggered upon command, either as document couriers, as assassins. Esterbrook. Yeah. And like World War I.
Right.
They're doing this World War I, it's Esterbrook, right? And there's a guy.
Esterbrook is early. So you got to go back to Esterbrook if you want to understand MK Ultra CIA. Esterbrook is really close to the beginning in Pavlov, and then maybe back to Mesmer, like you're like going back into the 19th century. But Esterbrook said that they advanced under him, hypnosis and the understanding of hypnosis, like there were radical advances within 10 years in the 40s.
But, I'm referring to someone who is like Charles. He said he was sort of a victim of Esterbrook's program. So it's sort of like and it's in, I think it's like early 30s that he,
that would make perfect sense.
Yeah. And so there
were experiments. They're doing that's the this interplay between Hoover and Esterbrook isn't like some kind of benign, like dry interplay. They're exchanging information. Esterbrook is telling them about all of their like experiments. He's talking about how he's hypnotizing. He's hypnotizing people in front of the FBI bigwigs. So it's a much richer dialogue of exchanging of information, right? And Esterbrook's, like in, I think, Hypnosis, his book Hypnosis, he flat out says, like, the control of hypnosis will be the next tool of world control that can change history. Like, I think he understood it. And for me, I've said this in other shows, hypnosis is the Rosetta Stone for the post-World War II American empire in America. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And it pervades so many stories. Process Church, Manson, all of the assassins, 9/11. It's all kind of hypnotic trance. There's a lot of specifics and things like this. Fairy, I just did a show on Fairy using post-hypnotic suggestion. People overlook all this stuff. I mean, it's off the charts. It's involved in so many important events that it shocks, it boggles the mind. Really, it really does.
Well, as I mentioned, hypnosis, we have a word, but just like NLP, what's the actual understanding of what hypnosis is? How is it misdefined, or how is it defined in a way, Las Vegas show, something like that, or someone actually walking around like a robot? Well,
right. How many
sure.
of those people on psych meds on this fluorohydroxychloroquine or whatever they call it these days are under hypnosis? How many of those people have shot people under the use of so-called, quote, antidepressants, unquote? Like, it's mislabeled just like everything else in big pharma. So you literally, if you take an antidepressant, you may be in a hypnotic state. Like, that should scare the living daylights out of everybody. And so many, there's a clear correlation. The media's denied it, but the media is a lie factory. It's a mockingbird media. But there's a correlation between the shooters and taking antidepressants because it puts you in a weird fugue state, just like hypnosis.
Well, yeah, and so hypnosis, like I mentioned, that Margaret Mead, the Cerebral Inhibition Conference, which I think it's impossible to find those proceedings, or I've never been able to, but it was called Cerebral Inhibition, which is we get into Beaksy, right? So he's also connected, and so this is cerebral inhibition.
Who
this
is this?
Sensory
What's his
inhibition.
name? Bateson or somebody?
No. BEK. Bekeysy.
Bekeysy. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So this is, or research in 1920s, 1930s that continued. This is, so hypnotic state. This state, you can be in a permanent hypnotic state and not even recognize it. Most of it is unrecognized. Okay. It has to do with also this inhibition of sensory inputs from the outside, of things like that. So
this guy, by using a strobe photography and silver flakes as a marker, he could move surface wave and stimulated by sound. Because of the structure of the cochlea, that's the eye, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different frequencies of sound cause maximum amplitudes of the waves to occur at different places on the basilar membrane along the coil of the cochlea. High frequencies can cause more vibration at the base of the cochlea, when low frequencies create more vibration at the apex. Wow, crazy.
Physiology. The real important people are physiologists. Wow, none of the BS that can be inherent or misinformation in psychology. These guys are doing hard science. So he was in Hungary, right? Connected with Lukas, part of the Soviet Union, but really important research and fundamental and not very well known anymore at all.
I never heard that name. I did not familiar with him at all. But that's like ties in with you, right? Sound, the influence of sound and frequency and things like that. And just start, it's really the starting off of our conversation tonight was these positive, negative frequencies, or this hidden influence of frequencies and sound, right?
Yeah. Well, one, obviously aspect of that, but this is just one example that really can start to clarify what hypnosis is and how we have a big part of this is creating a disconnective state of not being able to recognize what state you're actually in.
Good point.
And especially if you are under or in some kind of a trance state, by very definition, it's going to be a closed system loop, right? So unless you're able to have the sensory acuity, right? Not disordering your senses by taking LSD, but really, heightening your perception, getting much more clear and accurate perception. But yeah, Esther Brooks. So Rose,
I want to quote. We'll state this quote. People should screenshot this for their own reference. But basically, George Hoban Estabrooks died in 1973. Canadian American psychologist, Harvard University graduate, Rhodes Scholar, chairman of the Department of Psychology at Colgate University, and an authority on hypnosis during World War II. He is known for hypno-programming U.S. government agents during World War II. Quote, only a people who refuse to permit themselves to sink into intellectual lethargy and conformity, only a people who question and think can be sure that hypnosis disguised or direct will not undermine their freedom and rob them of their very lives. Screenshot that. He was not kidding. This is no joke.
Well, yeah, this is, it's all being applied. So let me just finish up this first little thing here. So
I've got about 5. I think we should just do a part 2 or plan on doing a part 2 because we're almost at the 90-minute mark.
Okay. Yeah. We can this may be a good stopping off point.
And maybe we should bring in Erickson into the next conversation and do a little bit more on Erickson because this is it. That's it.
Yeah. So anyways, I have like CyberSyn, which was a rollout almost of it completely of the global brain, right? In Allende's Chile, connected with Macy conference types of people with these. A lot of these were like Mead, Bateson, etc. They all were fellow travelers, like H.G. Wells, right? They're connected with the worldwide socialist movement. And you just hit one more slide here. I already talked about.
Yeah. It's interesting that you keyed into what is defining hypnosis, right? Because they know that this phenomenon exists, but almost every researcher has to define it, right? Something's going on, suggestibility in the brain and the subconscious and things. Like not everybody's hypnotizable, but even the specialists have trouble or had to really go in and define it with specificity. It's really interesting, like this phenomenon, but let's go to the next one.
Well, I think here's the thing. This phenomena becomes obscured as to what it actually is, and then it becomes normalized. Then it becomes a self-regulating process where you self-induce. Going back to that Grateful Dead playing at that, the Haight-Ashbury.
Right.
Look at those people. They look like hypnotic subjects, right?
Yes, they're in a trance. Yeah.
They're in a trance. And that's, as we go further into this, we'll see that the understanding of this within collective human resonant group structures, within psychological structures, going back to some of the stuff like Tesla, ether, some of these things, to understand some of these forces just because it's invisible doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If it's framed out of your existence, so you don't even know.
They're not going to say, we're going to hypnotize you now, Hans. Ready? Look into the TV screen. How many people, the TV is a hypnotized state. It's some form of state. And imagine, like you say, the effect upon humanity. Look at the people who watch a lot of TV and people who don't. They almost can't relate to each other. Like I don't watch TV that often. Maybe I'll watch a streaming thing, but I don't understand the people who watch TV very well. I don't sync with them. Whereas I think that the TV watchers who get their media and news from TV, they sync up with each other. Isn't that weird? Like it's like a parsing of the human society. It's odd.
Yeah, we'll get eventually, if we, depending on how far we're going with this, we'll get into this, an exact explanation of how and why this works and how it's implemented and how it's understood, but only by a very limited, people really have this full degree of understanding. So certain types of information, say, let's look at the actual physiological aspect of hypnotism, not just the language, not just this. That's one level. Television, exactly. A lot of research on television, especially done in the late 60s, early 70s. Nothing commensurate at all with modern media, with cell phones. Nothing has really gone into this. Video games, much higher level, amplitude. But television, some of the research said that you go into an altered state that can last for up to 2 weeks for watching television for several hours. And it's encoding everything you're seeing. It's almost like a film or a filter. So this is the thing. And then also, as you mentioned, which is part of this, is that the normalization, the collective So there's also a collective entrainment process. There is also
Yes.
the normal, generally speaking, kind of unconscious or semi-unconscious of modeling or mirroring others around you so you blend in.
Yes.
And that itself can induce you can act. If you're around a bunch of people that are angry, you start acting like you're angry. There's a good chance you're actually going to become angry. Or
It's really amazing. And when you're saying that, it makes me I read this one book by one of these mind control psychiatrists or psychologists. And the first chapter was how much of your personality is really your own. And it's a really important question, because how much of that is being programmed into you, literally TV programming, the word programming overlaps with hypnotism words, right? Hypnotism terminology. Like how much of this is like you're becoming like a conspicuous consumer like Thorstein Veblen or whatever. Like how much of that is really your personality? And you see these people who are clearly just aping things on television. Like I've been around them. Like they've actually been programmed. Like in the law, there are people from my generation who watched LA Law, and they literally went to law school because of LA Law. And then they emulated the drama in LA Law. Like I could see them and they'd reference the show, and I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like I never watched LA Law. I don't know what you're talking about. But it was interesting because it was like they were living out this program, just like you said, something that had been entrained into them.
And the thing is that, there's so many, so many different layers to this, but one of them is that so you have an overlay. You've been inducted into a type of a waking dream. You're not aware that you're actually in a waking dream. But then also a lot of these things, to sort of wake up or snap out requires some kind of inner will, inner decision, inner recognition. More often than not, well, it can be through some amazing ecstatic, it could be some divine revelation, some spiritual experience. More often than not, it's a gradual breakdown of meaning of your life, or even just witnessing other people, seeing that's, unfortunately, it's not that this is going to kill you, just recognizing, because we've all been affected to it. We've grown up in this environment, but like these shows, it creates a collective identity. But also, I'll give an example. I noticed on, a number of shows. Well, one thing, there's this theme of, it's all a dream. It's all a virtual reality simulation. So many shows, movies, they go to this thing. It's this, okay, that's one thing, which is, okay, you actually are it. Most people have been inducted into this because they have become who they actually are. Their own inner essence has been so co-opted and so diminished, or else so infused into these it's just like the DID programming, where you have
these are hypnotism terms, induction and hypnosis. You're inducing hypnotism. That's the goal. That's the calming voice. Hans, you're in a quiet room. I'm not going to go. I know some about it, but I'm not going to do it. But I mean, that's kind of what they're doing. They're trying to induce this hypnotic state or whatever. That's what's really scary is how many people are in there. And that Walter Boer book that I read from recently, like you said, the whole population's under some type of hypnotic attack, but they're just not aware of it.
The board is quite interesting. He's very important. But one thing is that, so you can't recognize it. And then the state, when you go around people that are not, you're not in the state that they're in. You found you go to like some venue or even someone's house, a party, people are watching television, people are watching a game, and there's almost like there could be almost a reaction.
Yeah, no,
because you're not under the control.
And conditioned response, right? Why don't you watching this TV? One of the interesting things, for people who are listening, they should just go walk around at night and just look, just not be creepy, but just walk on the sidewalk and watch how many people, their rooms are flashing from the TV for whatever it is, an ad or something like that. They're literally allowing themselves to be zapped by these TV shows, flashing lights and all that stuff. And you don't think this whole country is not influenced by hypnotism? You are naive, bro. Sorry.
Well, it's a 25th frame, right? So you have not only you have photic driving, all kinds of different optical things. You have all the symbolic meaning, language. So what I'm positing, I don't want to get freak people out too much, but if you see like that, I think like Fritz Springmeier talks about that, whatever his validity, he did some information, but in terms of also there was other stuff that came out about that in 80s 90s about how the human mind would be fractured into this grid of all these different sort of sub personalities, and you have self-destruct personality, you have this personality, you have that, you have particular functional states, you also have circumstantially triggered personalities. How many times people have these kind of grids programmed? They're going to respond in certain situations in relationships. I don't know if I honestly, I've never seen LA Law, but people that create drama for no reason.
Right. Drama creation is another thing. Like that's from your TV.
And
that's a very common thing. Like some people are stuck in families with drama creation and they don't know why it's like that. They're getting it from programming from the TV.
And they create it, they bring that to their work. They bring that to situations that there's no reason to have any drama. Or else this acting out, no emotional regulation. You feel something, you just gotta blah, and or else just this really totally eye-centered, totally egocentric, where you don't care about anybody else, really. But you are still completely under a hypnotic induction. Anyways.
It gets really scary. But Hans, we are at the 90-minute mark. Unfortunately got to wrap up.
Yes.
I'd love to do a part 2, another great conversation, great information. Can you promote your show again this Friday, March 8th, before we wrap it up?
Yeah. So Friday, March 8th in New York City and Queens. The time is, for whatever reason, the ticket thing says Pacific Standard Time is Eastern Standard Time. So it's like 7 to like 8:30 or 9 or something. And where's the theater? I don't know.
Thompson Avenue in Long Island City, New York.
Yeah. So if you can, please come out. It would be great and help support the arts. And
it's much better than being at home watching TV. You can go into a place and get some positive sonic vibrations, right? And relieve stress. That's the thing about a sitar. It's super relaxing, right? It's not like you're listening to Tool or something like that. And it's not just a sitar, it's singing and dancing as well. So you get some Eastern culture too. So check that out. I'll put a link to the show notes where you can buy tickets if you're in the New York area. Please go check it out. And then I'll also put links to the MK Ultra shows, the 8-part show we did, which was very well received. And also to your website, right? You just upgraded your website. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep. It's getting there. So it's cool.
It's Dr. Hans Uter. Is that correct? UTTR?
My website is just hansuter.com.
Hans Uter, sorry. Okay, sorry. Hans Uter. And then today's talk, which we covered a lot of territory, is advanced Soviet research on cybernetics, biofield, energetics, and cognitive restructuring with Dr. Hans Uter. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, William. Have a great evening.
You as well. Take care.